a given point in time. So if I watch something that was on television 2 days ago, it's likely that somewhere around me will listen to the same show. Not next year, but probably around this time, the same show. So we basically tend to kind of consume the same files, given a certain point in time. Maybe films from last year and not films from 20 years ago. And this is why there is a lot of redundancy and there is a lot of network traffic going on. And you would see that lots of this traffic is basically the same files being sent separately to lots of nodes and traveling a long, long way, even from the server room to somewhere else. Of course, now we have this company called Akamai, which uses a big array, I think about 100,000 or so Linux servers, and companies hire, kind of pay this company to use their server as a kind of a cache or a repository of copies, so they don't have to deliver lots of copies of the same site all over. If they want to release a Linux distribution, they could pay this company to localize copies of the distribution, then they don't really have to host it in as many places. And it can reduce the load on the servers or whatever. And this actually takes advantage of the fact that the companies will deliver very similar files to lots of people. Now, of course, one of the advantages to them having complete control of the files that they give to you is they can restrict your access to the files. They can control the form that you get the file in. They can restrict your ability to share it with friends, and they always want more and more control. That's the reason they want cloud computing, is because you basically depend on their binary files somewhere, and you don't actually give them any control. Therefore, you can charge them more. You can do things to these people that they will not necessarily like. You can force them to pay. You can force them to do all kinds of stuff. The danger here is if you think in terms of what the internet was supposed to achieve once it was made public, and what happens to it now, it's just going backwards. Even the news sites, the big news sites, might receive priorities when it comes to packets if we don't win the net neutrality battle in some stage. And there are very good talks about it by a professor, Eben Moglen, who he gives talks about the danger of cloud computing and how we go from a point where the network is a kind of a cloud of where everybody shares things with the neighbors and the peers, and increasingly we have this kind of this thing which more like resembles a network where you have these big nodes like Facebook and I suppose like Google, and everyone connects to these nodes instead of connecting to their peers, and we lose the distribution model. We actually go back to what we used to have in an analog world, and we don't take advantage of the network as it is.
Well, I was going to say, this reminds me of a story that I just saw, was it this week, about a Dutch ISP. I can't remember the name. They had already decided that they were going to apply the model where you pay for extra bits. So they say Skype is no longer part of your data plan in your ISP. So if you want to use Skype, you need to pay extra. You need to buy an extra package that includes that. And there's different examples about different brackets. I don't know if that was proper examples that they showed you, or if it was just a mock-up. And they're saying things like social networking, so like Facebook and MySpace and whatever. That's an extra $10 a month or €10 a month or whatever. And then you've got all these different services in different brackets for what you want to watch. Sort of buffet menu, if you like.
I mean, staying partly on topic, this highlights the problem we have in the UK. I think we get many people coming on television. Sometimes it's politicians, and sometimes it's prominent figures saying about this great new digital Britain where we've got streaming of high definition movies. But what people don't seem to realise is that we just don't have, certainly over here, the infrastructure to support it. The O2 is the ISP that I'm with, and whilst I signed up when they didn't have the fair use policy, and apparently I'm not under the fair use scheme or fair use policy now, it appears that breaching 25 gigabytes of data in your month means that you get fined or you get your services restricted. And it just shows that in the UK here, far from being digital Britain, we're more sort of analog Britain, because we just don't have the infrastructure to accommodate all these new services and high fancy streaming.
I think when politicians talk about that, they're assuming that all broadband is equal. And the packages they'll be on, paid for by the taxpayer, they'll be the top end ones where there is no limit. And they can do whatever they want, and it's all just charge it back to the taxpayer. Download porn, just send the bill, pay-per-view porn site, send the bill to the taxpayer.
I don't.
Honest? Go ahead.
Sorry, Rusty. No, sorry. Go ahead, Rusty.
I was going to say, honestly, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, in that, like you're saying, if your infrastructure really is that taxed, then the only way to really allow it to do that is to distribute it over the whole infrastructure rather than having these point exit. Because literally, like Roy was saying, when you're doing point client-server relation like that, you're doubling the same file by the number of users accessing it. You're using that much more pipe. Or if you distribute it, you can cut that in half to 75%, which allows the same infrastructure to do 2 to 4 times as much while distributing to the same number of people because of its distributed nature. The real problem with that is also, though, one of the things that isn't built into the current torrent protocol, like right now, all my videos are on YouTube. I can go to YouTube, and because they're all accessing them from Google's server, I know how many people access them. And if you're doing things that are dependent on advertising, having accurate metrics are important. When you distribute it over the node of the network, unless all the distributing nodes are sending a few packets back to the primary node going, by the way, we helped distribute this again, they don't have accurate metrics then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is true, but it doesn't actually, it reminds me very much of this notion of like lost revenue and how people say if you share the film with a friend, that's lost revenue, which of course isn't quite so simple. There is no correlation here. There is even a causation, I suppose. Anyway, the fact is, if you are distributing a movie to a friend, do you actually need to know, or do you have to inform someone that there is a benefit to be made here, or should you extrapolate? If you're sharing a film that you can share with the receiver can actually share with another person, you could actually take this into account, do an extrapolation. But all of this whole notion of, I should point out that some companies do try to take advantage of people's nodes. In Skype there are super nodes, in Windows updates they do try to use people's computers as I think they at least experimented at some stages with trying to have computers share the updates because it's very large files. And in the case of the European Commission, or just European something, they invested in torrent back in 2000 and around 2009. I think they sank about 20 million euros, I suppose, into something that's supposed to increase the use of torrent in the common sense that we think about, which is completely legal, and therefore increase the speed for everyone and decrease the cost of accessing material.
Well, and really the only reason there's any lost revenue is because the way we do PPM and PPC right now are very archaic. If we would just update the logic on how people get paid, there wouldn't be any lost revenue. It'd be a non-issue.
Well, sorry, I mean, go on, sorry.
Right, I was just going to quickly say, a lot of these companies, a lot of the content providers, they're selling you one thing, but they're doing something else as well. They're not selling. They're in the business to make money. The fact that they pump out DVDs or Blu-ray discs or whatever, just happens to be the product that they're in. They don't care about the product. All they care about is the fact that you buy it. Otherwise, they wouldn't do sequel after sequel after sequel, getting lamer and lamer and watering down concept again and again and again, because they know there's a demographic that will rush out to the cinema and pay money to see it, no matter how naff it is. They don't care about the product. All they care about is the money.
Well, I think we'll close that topic off there and just end it on, if anybody isn't from the UK, it might interest people from around the world to know that in certain parts of the UK we're still effectively on dial-up speeds. I was reading an email from somebody who's listened to the show previously, who said that effectively for the past 2 years that they've been on dial-up speeds and that they still haven't seen this digital revolution that the government's been promising. It's prompted me to write another article on the matter, because we're told repeatedly on the television and in the press that it's digital Britain, how business and industry should start